My name is Calixta Joanne, and I am 28 years old. My phone vibrated against the cold kitchen counter at exactly 6 in the morning on a Saturday, October 14th. The caller ID showed my lead florist calling from the Savannah Botanical Estate. I took a slow sip of my dark roast coffee before answering. The voice on the other end was breathless and strained. "Ma'am, there is a woman in a bridal gown standing outside the main atrium. She is yelling at my crew to tear down the black and gold corporate staging. She says this is her wedding and her theme is blush pink." I traced the rim of my ceramic mug with my thumb. Let me guess. She is wearing a custom designer gown and she brought our mother. "Yes," the florist whispered. "They are threatening to call the police if we do not remove your company logos from the entrance right now." "What do you want us to do?" "Tell the guards to let them stare through the glass," I said, "but do not unlock the doors." I ended the call and looked down at my glowing screen. A text message sat in my notifications, sent 30 minutes earlier by my older sister, Peyton. "Thanks for giving up the venue, sis. See you at the altar." My sister genuinely believed today was her wedding day. She believed she had successfully stolen my venue, hijacked my carefully chosen date, and forced me into quiet submission with the full backing of our parents. 8 months ago, they sat me down and told me to cancel my dream wedding because Peyton wanted it. They told me to be the bigger person. They made it clear that my happiness was nothing compared to her flawless social image. I did not scream. I did not throw things. I smiled, took their buyout check, and told them the venue was hers. They walked away thinking they had broken me. They had no idea I never canceled my contract. I just repurposed it. I spent 8 months secretly orchestrating the most critical corporate launch of my career on the exact day Peyton thought she was getting married. Before I explain how I legally dismantled my sister's delusion without lifting a single finger, welcome to Revenge Order. Please take a second to like this video and subscribe if you enjoy seeing entitled people face reality. Drop a comment telling me your age and where you are watching from today. To understand why Peyton was currently locked out of her own fabricated fairy tale, you have to understand the paperwork. The Savannah Botanical Estate does not hand out physical keys. When I signed the non-transferable lease for my event planning firm, Joan & Co., I agreed to the exclusive gate authority clause. That legally binding rule meant the wrought iron gates and glass atrium doors would only open for one specific biometric fingerprint: mine. Peyton was standing in the humid Georgia morning air, realizing she had 150 guests arriving in a few hours, no caterer, no flowers, and no legal right to step foot on the property. But the trap I built for her did not spring into existence today. It started back in February in my parents' dining room, when I realized my family viewed my life as something they could simply pack up and hand to someone else. 8 months before my phone rang with news of a bridal meltdown at the gates, I sat in my downtown office reviewing velvet fabric swatches. February rain beat against the glass windows of Joan & Company, the luxury event planning firm I built entirely from scratch. The air smelled of fresh eucalyptus and hot printer ink. I ran my fingers over a rich emerald textile, calculating vendor margins for a spring gala. Building a brand in the high-end Southern event space required meticulous attention to detail, endless sleepless nights, and a refusal to fail. I paid for my own college tuition, I secured my own business loans, I cultivated my own client list. My parents, Thomas and Brenda, did not contribute a single dime to my company. Every spare dollar, every ounce of their emotional bandwidth funneled directly toward my older sister. Peyton was 30 years old and operated under the assumption that the world owed her a red carpet. Our parents routinely bailed her out of mounting credit card debt, funded her European vacations, and praised her simply for existing. Peyton had recently secured a diamond engagement ring from a man named Preston. Preston was an investment banker residing in New York, a man who spent 80 hours a week chained to a trading floor. His family possessed generations of quiet, old Southern wealth, and his father reigned as a formidable partner at a prestigious corporate law firm. Peyton viewed Preston not as a partner, but as a glittering trophy to display to her friends. Because Preston possessed neither the time nor the physical proximity to plan a wedding, Peyton volunteered to handle every local detail in Georgia. She framed this as an act of devotion. In reality, she wanted to prove to his intimidating family that she could orchestrate a flawless, high society event, securing her status as a capable, sophisticated wife. While Peyton spent her afternoons browsing bridal magazines and sipping mimosas on our parents' patio, my fiancé and I were finalizing our own future. Liam worked as a financial analyst, possessing a quiet, steady strength that grounded my often chaotic life. We did not want a chaotic, sprawling wedding. We wanted elegance, precision, and privacy. On a crisp Tuesday morning, Liam and I sat across the polished mahogany desk of the director at the Savannah Botanical Estate. The venue was the crown jewel of the city, featuring sprawling manicured gardens, an architectural glass atrium, and a strict waiting list. I slid my pen across the heavy ivory paper of the lease agreement, signing my name on the dotted line. Liam signed right below mine, his shoulder brushing comfortably against my own. This contract was a masterpiece of modern legal protection. The estate catered to high-profile clients and politicians, meaning their privacy protocols were ironclad. The document specified that the lease was strictly non-transferable. Furthermore, the estate employed an exclusive biometric security system. The wrought iron gates and glass doors required my specific fingerprint to unlock on the day of the event. No one else could authorize entry. I pushed the signed contract across the desk, handing over a non-refundable deposit check for $15,000. We secured October 14th. The date was ours. Walking out of the estate with Liam, breathing in the scent of blooming jasmine, a heavy sense of triumph washed over me. I finally had something beautiful that belonged only to me. My sister had a lifelong habit of coveting my possessions and claiming my milestones as her own. When I turned 16, I bought a new dress and waited by the front door for my birthday dinner. My mother walked out, shaking her head. "We have to cancel the reservation, Calixta. Peyton went through a bad breakup and needs the restaurant space to grieve with her friends. Go change." That memory always sat like a cold stone in my chest. Peyton stealing my moments was a deeply ingrained pathology, enabled by parents who viewed my boundaries as an inconvenience. 2 days after securing the botanical estate, the familiar scent of heavy floral perfume invaded my office. Peyton walked in unannounced, dropping her designer handbag onto my staging table and disrupting a careful arrangement of floral blueprints. She did not ask how my business was doing. She did not ask how Liam was holding up. Her eyes darted around my workspace, cataloging my assets. She spotted a glossy brochure for the Savannah Botanical Estate peeking out from under a file folder. Her manicured fingernail tapped the heavy cardstock. "I hear you booked the estate," she said, her tone dripping with artificial sweetness. I kept my gaze fixed on my laptop screen, typing a response to a catering vendor. "Word travels fast," I replied. Peyton leaned over my desk, invading my personal space. "I need to see your venue contract," she demanded, "just to get some budget ideas for my own planning. You know Preston's family is expecting perfection, and I need to know what the estate charges for their platinum tier." Internal alarm bells rang in my head. Peyton never asked for information out of innocent curiosity. She gathered intelligence to see what she could mimic, what she could outdo, or what she could simply take. Handing over my contract meant giving her the exact financial breakdown, the vendor requirements, and the date I had secured. I closed my laptop and looked her directly in the eyes. "No." Her fake smile faltered, her jaw tightening. "Excuse me. I cannot share my contracts, Peyton. I run a professional agency. Those documents contain proprietary vendor rates and client confidentiality agreements. You will have to call the estate and ask for their standard pricing packet yourself." She stood up straight, crossing her arms over her chest. "You are being incredibly selfish. I am trying to plan a wedding that merges two prominent families, and you are hoarding resources. Mom is not going to like this attitude. Tell Mom whatever you wish, I said, turning my attention to a stack of fabric samples. Close the door on your way out. Peyton snatched her handbag off the table, knocking a spool of ribbon onto the floor. She marched out of the office, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood. I let out a long breath, bending down to retrieve the ribbon. I knew Peyton would not let a denial stand. She perceived the word no as a personal insult. That evening, I sat on my living room sofa with Liam, eating takeout sushi and watching the evening news. I recounted Peyton's bizarre visit to my office. Liam frowned, setting his chopsticks down. He knew my family dynamic intimately. He knew that when Peyton faced an obstacle, Thomas and Brenda acted as her bulldozers. Keep a physical copy of our venue lease in the fireproof safe, Liam advised, his voice low and serious. And do not leave any wedding planning documents on your desk where she can drop by and photograph them. I nodded, agreeing with his caution. We spent the rest of the night discussing catering menus, deliberately pushing my sister out of our minds. I convinced myself that Peyton would simply find another venue, that she would get distracted by floral arrangements and bridesmaid dresses. I assumed my strict refusal had ended the conflict. 3 days later, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. The screen illuminated the darkened bedroom, displaying a new notification in the family group chat. The message came from Brenda. I opened it, my stomach dropping as I read the words. Family dinner this Sunday at the country club. Peyton has a monumental announcement regarding her wedding, and it will require everyone's cooperation. Do not be late. I stared at the glowing text, the cool blue light reflecting in the dark room. The word cooperation felt like a threat. My mother never used that word unless she expected someone to sacrifice their own comfort to appease my sister. I locked my phone and set it face down, a cold sense of dread creeping into my veins. The war had not ended in my office. It was only just beginning. Sunday evening arrived with a suffocating humidity that clung to the Spanish moss outside the Oakwood Country Club. The establishment served as my parents' second home, a place built on aged mahogany, expensive bourbon, and silent judgments. Liam drove us there in his sedan, his right hand resting firmly over my left on the center console. His presence offered a steady anchor against the incoming tide of my family. We walked through the grand foyer, the scent of roasted duck and lemon polish hanging in the air. My parents held court at a prime corner booth in the dining room. Thomas wore a tailored navy blazer, swirling an amber liquid in his crystal glass. Brenda sat beside him, draped in a cashmere cardigan, her posture rigid and perfect. Peyton occupied the opposite side of the table, nursing a vibrant pink martini. She wore a smug, self-satisfied expression that set my nerves on edge before I even took my seat. We exchanged hollow pleasantries. Brenda offered a thin compliment regarding my dress while scrutinizing the fabric quality. Thomas asked Liam a cursory question about financial markets, not listening to the answer. Peyton spent the first 20 minutes staring at her own reflection in her phone screen, turning her left hand to catch the chandelier light on her diamond ring. As the waiter cleared our appetizer plates, Peyton tapped her manicured fingernail against her crystal glass. The sharp clinking sound cut through the low murmur of the dining room. I have some thrilling news, Peyton announced, her voice pitched loud enough to ensure neighboring tables could hear her. Preston and I finalized our vision for the ceremony. We chose our date and our location. Brenda clapped her hands together, radiating artificial delight. "Oh, darling, tell us everything." Peyton looked directly at me. Her eyes held a predatory glint. "We are getting married on October 14th at the Savannah Botanical Estate." Liam went entirely rigid beside me, the muscles in his jaw locked tight. I slowly set my water glass down on the crisp linen tablecloth. The sheer audacity hung in the air like smoke. My sister did not just want a beautiful wedding. She wanted my specific wedding. She wanted the exact date and the exact glass atrium I had secured just days prior. She had weaponized my boundary from the office and turned it into a public ambush. "I booked that venue on Tuesday," I said, keeping my voice low and level, "for October 14th. You know this, Peyton." Peyton waved her hand, dismissing my reality as an inconvenient fly. Preston has relatives flying in from Europe. His father has a strict trial schedule. It is the only weekend that works for his family, Calixta. Brenda leaned forward, her expression shifting into a mask of condescending patience. You plan parties for a living, dear. You have connections all over the city. You can easily find another building for your little ceremony. Peyton needs this specific aesthetic to impress her future in-laws. Be the bigger person and step aside. The casual cruelty of her request washed over me. My mother viewed my career, my relationship, and my wedding as disposable stepping stones for her golden child. I cannot step aside, I replied, folding my hands in my lap. I signed a binding lease. I paid a $15,000 non-refundable deposit. The date is locked. The air temperature at the table dropped. Thomas set his bourbon glass down with a heavy thud. He despised the word no. He operated under the belief that every obstacle possessed a price tag, and every person possessed a breaking point. He reached into the breast pocket of his blazer and withdrew a leather-bound checkbook. He uncapped his silver fountain pen. The scratching sound of the nib against the paper echoed in my ears. He filled out the date, wrote my name, and scribbled a sequence of numbers. He tore the slip of paper from the binding and slid it across the table. It stopped mere inches from my plate. $15,000. You will surrender the reservation to your sister, Thomas commanded, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. If you embarrass Peyton, if you jeopardize this union with the Preston family over your own stubborn pride, you are no longer part of this family. We will cut contact. You will not be welcome in our home. Liam shifted his weight, preparing to defend me. I pressed my knee against his leg under the table, a silent signal to hold his fire. I stared at the check. Arguing with delusion is a losing battle. Fighting a man who views his daughter as a transactional liability would only result in endless screaming and public humiliation. I needed them to believe they had won. I needed to feed their egos until they were blind to their own vulnerability. I executed a calculated surrender. I let my breathing hitch, inhaling a sharp, shaky breath. I widened my eyes, forcing moisture to gather along my lower lashes. I allowed a single, pristine tear to slip down my cheek. It was a performance worthy of a theater stage. Peyton smirked, taking a victorious sip of her martini. Brenda let out a quiet sigh of relief, relaxing her shoulders. They saw my fake tears and assumed they had shattered my spirit. They assumed my grief meant their triumph. I reached into my designer tote bag resting on the chair beside me. I retrieved a sleek, embossed notepad featuring my official Joan & Company letterhead. I produced my own pen. If you want the date, I need to provide a formal receipt for my accounting records, I whispered, keeping my voice fragile and defeated. Thomas nodded, satisfied with my apparent submission. Make it quick. I placed the pen against the thick paper. I did not write the word cancellation. I did not write the word transfer. Those words held specific legal definitions that would terminate my hold on the estate. Instead, I wrote a brilliant tactical phrase, consulting and date hold relinquishment fee. I signed my name at the bottom, tore the sheet from the pad, and handed it to my father. Thomas glanced at the paper, saw his $15,000 total acknowledged, and folded the receipt into his pocket without analyzing the specific terminology. He assumed relinquishing the date meant I was giving it to Peyton. He slid the check closer to my hand. I picked up the financial peace offering. I wiped the fake tear from my face, replacing my sorrow with a chillingly serene smile. Okay, I said softly. It is hers. I stood up from the booth. Liam stood beside me, leaving a $20 bill on the table for the valet. We walked out of the dining room without looking back. My parents and my sister remained in their booth, celebrating a victory that did not exist. The moment the heavy wooden doors of the country club closed behind us, the fragility vanished from my posture. I stepped into the cool night air, breathing deeply. Liam unlocked his sedan, and we slid into the leather seats. He turned to look at me, confusion knitting his brows together. "Why did you just sell our wedding venue to your sister?" "I did not sell her our venue," I replied, pulling my phone from my purse. I opened my banking application and selected the mobile deposit feature. I smoothed the $15,000 check against my thigh, snapping a clear photograph of the front and the back. I confirmed the deposit, transferring the funds directly into my limited liability company account. I showed Liam the receipt copy I had saved on my phone. "The wording changes everything," I explained, a genuine smile forming on my lips. I relinquished the wedding hold. I did not cancel the lease. As of tomorrow morning, I am pivoting the booking from a personal marital ceremony to a corporate gala for Joan & Company. Liam stared at me, his eyes widening as the realization dawned on him. "The venue is still yours." "It is entirely mine," I confirmed. "The contract is non-transferable. My sister just paid me $15,000 to fund my upcoming business rebrand, and she thinks she bought herself a fairy tale." Liam let out a low laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. I tucked my phone away, watching the streetlights pass by the passenger window. My family believed they had buried my happiness. They had no idea I was already digging the foundation for an empire right beneath their feet. The morning after the ambush at the country club, my family group chat exploded with activity. Peyton treated the digital thread like her personal broadcast network. She flooded the chat with inspiration boards, endless photos of blush pink chiffon, and links to expensive designer shoe catalogs. Her tone shifted from demanding to insufferably patronizing. She tagged me in every message, attaching strings of heart emojis. She treated me not as a sibling, but as a vanquished opponent forced to carry her train. "Calixta, do you think Preston's mother would prefer the champagne flutes with the gold rim or the platinum rim?" she texted. "Since you are not busy planning your own day anymore, I figured you could make yourself useful and help me pick." I set my phone face down on my desk. I refused to engage with her manufactured reality. My silence only fueled her arrogance. She interpreted my lack of response as quiet devastation. Brenda chimed in an hour later, reinforcing the narrative of my defeat. "Leave your sister alone, Peyton," Brenda wrote, the passive aggression bleeding through the pixels. "Calixta needs time to process. She is probably burying herself in her event planning work to cope. We must give her grace while she adjusts to our new plans." They wanted me broken. They needed me compliant. Have you ever let someone dig their own grave while cheerfully handing them the shovel? I watched the messages roll in, feeling nothing but clinical detachment. I did not need grace. I needed logistical supremacy. I picked up my office landline and dialed the direct extension for the Savannah Botanical Estate. The manager, a sharp woman named Beatrice, who had overseen hundreds of high society events, answered on the second ring. "Beatrice, good morning," I said, maintaining a professional, slightly somber tone. "I am calling regarding my lease for October 14th. "Good morning, Calixta," Beatrice replied cheerfully. "Are you calling to finalize the deposit structure for the catering load-in?" "I am calling to formally pivot the nature of the booking," I explained. "Liam and I have decided to host a private marital ceremony elsewhere later in the year. However, I am retaining the estate lease. I will be transforming the October 14th reservation into the 5-year anniversary gala and official corporate rebranding launch for Joan & Company." There was a brief pause on the line before Beatrice smoothly shifted gears. "Understood. The contract allows for a change in event scope as long as the guest count and security protocols remain intact. A corporate gala will be a spectacular use of the glass atrium." "Thank you," I said, lowering my voice to project a sense of deep personal concern. "There is one other sensitive matter I need to discuss with you. It involves my family." "Of course, Calixta. Our conversations are strictly confidential." "My older sister Peyton is currently experiencing a severe psychiatric episode." I lied flawlessly. "She is under immense pressure regarding an upcoming marriage. She has developed a vivid delusion that my October event is actually her wedding. She believes she holds the lease to the estate." "Oh my goodness," Beatrice murmured, genuine sympathy coloring her words. "That sounds incredibly stressful for your family." It is a delicate situation, I continued. We are working with medical professionals to navigate her reality without causing unnecessary trauma. If Peyton, or my mother Brenda, calls the estate attempting to discuss a wedding or alter any details for October 14th, please do not engage with them. Denying her delusion triggers severe panic attacks. I understand completely, Beatrice assured me. We encounter complicated family dynamics often. I will place a strict internal block on your file. If anyone other than you calls inquiring about that date, my staff will state that the calendar is locked and redirect all inquiries to your office. She will not be able to access our planning system. Thank you, Beatrice. Your discretion means everything to me. I disconnected the call. The psychological block was officially in place. Peyton could call the estate 100 times, and she would hit a reinforced wall of polite corporate deflection. She would never realize she was speaking to a closed door until it was entirely too late. With my perimeter secured, I turned my attention to the $15,000 check Thomas had forced upon me. The funds had cleared my business account that morning. I opened my accounting software and created a new project folder labeled October Gala. I began allocating the budget. I upgraded the lighting package to include dramatic spotlighting for the entrance. I expanded the catering menu to feature a raw oyster bar and top-tier champagne. Then I added a specific line item that would serve as the final nail in my family's social coffin. Local press and media presence, $2,000. I intended to invite the editors of Savannah's premier lifestyle magazines, prominent local influencers, and regional business reporters. I wanted cameras. I wanted high-definition documentation of my company's triumph. The media presence was not just for brand visibility. It was a calculated insurance policy. If Peyton attempted a public confrontation at the gates, I wanted an audience capable of broadcasting her behavior to the exact social circles my parents valued above all else. Weeks bled into months. Spring arrived, painting Savannah in vibrant shades of magenta and lush green. The humidity began to rise, and with it, the frantic pace of Peyton's imaginary wedding planning. She lived in a total echo chamber of lies. Because Beatrice's staff politely deflected her calls, Peyton simply assumed her wedding was locked in. Because Thomas and Brenda funded her every whim, she never questioned the mechanics of securing a venue. She operated on the blind faith of privilege. In early May, I received a thick, heavy envelope in the mail. The return address featured calligraphy so ornate it was difficult to read. I sliced the seal open with a silver letter opener. Inside sat a lavish, gold-foiled invitation. The heavy cardstock announced the upcoming union of Peyton and Preston. The details were spelled out in sweeping cursive font. Saturday, October 14th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the Savannah Botanical Estate. I stared at the physical evidence of her delusion. She had spent thousands of dollars printing invitations for a building she had no legal right to enter. She had mailed these lies to 150 high-net-worth individuals, prominent attorneys, and family friends across the country. She had staked her entire social reputation on a venue she stole in her mind, but never secured in reality. I did not throw the invitation away. I walked over to the cork vision board hanging above my desk. I used a silver pushpin to secure Peyton's fake wedding announcement right next to the approved blueprints for my corporate stage design. The tension in my chest tightened, a coiled spring waiting to snap. Every time my phone buzzed with another brag from Peyton, every time my mother texted reminding me to stay out of my sister's way, the spring compressed further. They were building a massive, fragile glass house. They were throwing stones at me from inside it. I just had to wait for moving day to watch the walls shatter. While Peyton mailed out gold-foiled lies across the eastern seaboard, Liam and I sat in our kitchen, finalizing a truth of our own. We spread brochures across the granite island, drinking cheap red wine and laughing. We did not want a wedding shadowed by my parents' conditional love or my sister's insatiable greed. We craved peace. We craved a celebration that belonged entirely to us. We found our sanctuary in a private, historic villa nestled deep in the Georgia mountains. The property featured ancient stone fireplaces, exposed wooden beams, and a strict capacity limit of 30 guests. We booked it for the second week of December. No grand announcements, no sprawling guest lists. Only our closest, chosen family would receive invitations. We kept this genuine booking a complete secret from my parents. If they did not know the battlefield existed, they could not deploy their troops. With my personal life secured in December, my professional life consumed October. The Savannah Botanical Estate would serve as the ultimate display of my agency's capabilities. I pulled the original design boards for my canceled wedding and fed them through a paper shredder. I started fresh. I needed a visual aesthetic that communicated absolute authority. Peyton had spent weeks bombarding the family chat with her chosen wedding theme. She selected blush pink and draped chiffon. Her vision board looked like a fragile, spun sugar dessert. It symbolized everything she was: delicate, traditional, eager to submit to the aesthetic expectations of old Southern money, and entirely lacking substance. My corporate launch required a sharper edge. I selected a palette of matte black and brushed gold. The combination projected wealth, unyielding boundaries, and raw power. I ordered custom black velvet tablecloths. I designed towering centerpieces constructed from bleached branches and gold-dipped orchids. I contracted a lighting firm to bathe the glass atrium in a warm amber glow that would contrast starkly against the night sky. My event would not whisper. It would command the room. The logistical trap I set began to tighten in early June. Securing a premium venue in Savannah is difficult, but securing elite vendors for a fall weekend requires booking a year in advance. Peyton, blinded by her own arrogance, assumed she could simply snap her fingers and summon a catering team. She sent a direct text message to my personal phone on a Tuesday afternoon. "Send me the contact information for the caterer and the string quartet you were going to use before you gave up the estate," Peyton demanded, skipping any form of greeting. "Preston's mother wants to review their menu options," I smiled, my fingers flying across the digital keyboard. I cheerfully provided the names and phone numbers of the two most exclusive vendors in the city, Chef Armand's Culinary Group and the Savannah Symphony Quartet. I gave her the information because I possessed absolute certainty she could never hire them. 8 months prior, when I signed the original lease for the botanical estate, I also signed binding exclusivity clauses with Chef Armand and the quartet. I paid their retainers. I locked them in for October 14th. They were legally obligated to service Joan and Company, and their contracts explicitly prohibited taking secondary bookings on that date. I sat back in my desk chair and waited for the inevitable explosion. It took less than 48 hours. My phone vibrated violently against my desk, rattling my coffee mug. The family group chat lit up with a barrage of frantic messages from Peyton. "I cannot believe the unprofessionalism of these vendors," Peyton typed, attaching a screenshot of an email from Chef Armand's office. "They are both claiming they are entirely fully booked for my date. They refuse to even take a consultation meeting. This is ridiculous. Do they not know who Preston's family is?" Brenda immediately jumped into the digital fray, her protective maternal instincts weaponized against the wrong target. "This is unacceptable," Brenda wrote. "Calixta, you work in this industry. You know these people. Call them immediately and explain the situation. Tell them they need to make accommodations for your sister's wedding. Use your leverage to force them to accept the contract." I stared at the screen, a cold satisfaction washing over me. My mother wanted me to strong-arm independent businesses into breaking legally binding contracts to appease her favorite child. She viewed my professional reputation as a tool she could wield for Peyton's benefit. I drafted a polite, clinical response. "Mom, I cannot force independent vendors to break their existing legal commitments. October is peak event season. If they are fully booked, their calendars are locked. Peyton will have to explore other options. I suggest she acts quickly before the secondary tier vendors fill up as well." My phone rang within seconds. The caller ID flashed my mother's name. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Calix de Joanne," Brenda hissed into the receiver, dispensing with any pleasantries. "You are being deliberately unhelpful. Your sister is under immense stress trying to pull this wedding together for an important family. You have the industry pull to fix this catering issue. Fix it." I kept my voice calm, projecting the serene authority of a professional. "I cannot fix a locked calendar, Mom. If Chef Armand has a signed contract with another client for October 14th, he is legally bound to that client. Asking him to breach his contract would destroy my standing in the local industry. Peyton needs to pivot." I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "You are punishing her," Brenda accused, her voice rising in pitch. "You are still bitter about yielding the venue, so you are refusing to help her secure decent food. This is petty, even for you." "I am running a business," I replied smoothly. "Peyton is planning a party. I cannot sacrifice my professional integrity to solve her logistical failures. She should have booked her caterer months ago." I ended the call before Brenda could launch another volley of accusations. I set my phone down, feeling the familiar sting of my mother's unyielding bias. It did not matter that I was right. It did not matter that her request was unethical. In her eyes, my refusal to serve as Peyton's savior constituted an act of treason. Desperation is a dangerous motivator. Facing the reality of an uncatered reception and too arrogant to admit failure to Preston's wealthy family, Peyton panicked. She scoured the internet for a solution. She bypassed the reputable, established vendors who required extensive consultations and verifiable references. Instead, Peyton hired a company she found through a targeted social media advertisement. The company advertised themselves as an elite, all-in-one event solution. They promised to provide gourmet catering, luxury floral design, and complete day-of coordination for a fraction of the standard industry cost. Peyton bragged about her brilliant find in the family chat. "I secured a comprehensive vendor team," she boasted. "They are handling everything." They were incredibly accommodating and did not require any of those ridiculous meetings. Preston's family will be blown away. I read the message, my eyebrows raising in genuine surprise. No reputable vendor team operating at a high society level skips consultation meetings. No luxury caterer offers discount packages. Peyton had bypassed every safety protocol in the event planning industry simply because a slick website told her exactly what she wanted to hear. I sat at my desk, looking up at the vision board where Peyton's gold foiled wedding invitation hung, pinned next to my black and gold corporate designs. Her house of cards was no longer just fragile. It was actively crumbling under its own weight. She had mailed out 150 promises for a venue she did not lease, to be catered by a company she had never vetted. The tension coiled tighter, a silent, invisible trap waiting in the dark. Peyton was not just digging her own grave anymore. She was paying for the headstone. August descended upon Georgia like a wet, heavy wool blanket. The summer heat drove tourists indoors and turned the pavement into a shimmering mirage. Inside the air-conditioned offices of Joan & Company, my team operated at a frantic, hyper-focused pace. The corporate gala loomed less than 2 months away. The transition from an imaginary wedding date to a high-stakes industry launch required logistical precision that left no room for error. On a suffocating Tuesday morning, I drove out to the Savannah Botanical Estate. I needed to conduct a final physical walkthrough of the grand lobby. I brought along my lead production designer, Marcus. We needed to verify the exact spatial dimensions for a massive 20-foot black and gold step and repeat media board. The board would serve as the primary photo backdrop for the press and high net worth clients arriving at the gala. It was the visual anchor of the entire event, displaying my brand logo in stark, unyielding typography. The estate lobby was cool, quiet, and smelled faintly of expensive floor wax and fresh-cut lilies. Marcus and I stood near the entrance to the glass atrium, a sprawling set of architectural blueprints spread out across a marble high-top table. I held a laser measuring tape, calculating the distance between the primary entrance doors and the proposed location for the media wall. Everything must be flawless, I told Marcus, noting a measurement on my clipboard. The photographers need a clear, unobstructed angle the moment guests step through those doors. The branding has to hit them immediately. Marcus nodded, adjusting a line on the blueprint with a sharp pencil. We have exactly 22 feet of clearance. The board will fit perfectly, but we need to ensure the lighting rigs do not block the natural flow of traffic into the main hall. I leaned over the table, analyzing the traffic flow diagram. I was entirely immersed in the technical reality of my corporate launch. I did not hear the heavy mahogany entrance doors swing open. I did not hear the sharp click of designer heels against the polished marble floor. I am looking for Beatrice, a loud, demanding voice echoed through the cavernous lobby. I need a manager to walk me through the atrium immediately. My spine locked. My breath hitched in my throat. I recognized that demanding, entitled tone instantly. It was the same tone she used to demand my childhood toys, the same tone she used to command our parents' attention, and the same tone she used to steal my wedding date. Peyton. I whipped my head around. My older sister stood 20 feet away, near the reception desk. She wore a bright sundress, oversized sunglasses pushed up into her hair, and a look of profound annoyance. She had bypassed the security gate by claiming she was there for a quick drop-in tour, a common occurrence for prospective clients, but a disastrous variable for my carefully controlled reality. My mind raced, calculating the immediate threat vectors. Peyton believed she was walking into her own wedding venue to visualize her blush pink aisle. I was standing in the lobby, with corporate blueprints clearly detailing a massive Joan & Company branding event scheduled for her exact date. If Beatrice, the venue manager, stepped out of her office right now and greeted Peyton, the psychological block I had established would crumble. Beatrice would assume Peyton was experiencing her reported psychiatric delusion, an attempt to redirect her to me. Peyton would see my blueprints. The entire 8-month facade would shatter in an instant. I had seconds to react. I dropped my laser measuring tape onto the table, my hand moving fast enough to flip the corporate blueprints upside down, hiding the black and gold branding diagrams from view. "Marcus, go grab us coffees from the cafe down the street," I ordered, keeping my voice low and urgent. "Take the blueprints with you, now." Marcus, sensing the sudden sharp spike in my adrenaline, did not ask questions. He rolled up the heavy paper tubes, grabbed his keys, and slipped out the side exit just as Peyton turned her head and spotted me standing alone by the marble table. Her sunglasses slid down the bridge of her nose. "Calixta," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and immediate suspicion. "What are you doing here?" I forced my heart rate to slow, engaging the clinical detachment that had become my armor. I plastered a serene, slightly weary smile onto my face and walked directly toward her, closing the physical distance to ensure she did not wander toward Beatrice's office. "Peyton," I said, keeping my tone mild, "I am just finalizing some tedious paperwork." "Paperwork," she repeated, crossing her arms over her chest. Her eyes darted around the empty lobby, searching for clues. "You gave up this venue months ago. Why are you still handling paperwork?" I stepped smoothly into her line of sight, blocking her view of the reception desk. "Corporate bureaucracy," I lied, my voice steady and convincing. "When a lease of this magnitude is altered, the venue requires physical signatures to release the liability clauses. I had to come down in person to finalize the last of the cancellation documents and formally close out my original account." Peyton's posture relaxed. The suspicion in her eyes melted away, replaced by a sickening, triumphant glow. She absorbed my lie completely because it fed the narrative she desperately wanted to believe. She wanted to picture me standing in the lobby of her dream venue, signing away my happiness. "Wow," Peyton said, a patronizing smile curving her lips. "That must be really difficult for you, coming back here, seeing the space, having to officially sign it away." "It is just business, Peyton," I replied, maintaining my serene facade. "I am a professional. I handle logistics." "It is very brave of you," she countered, reaching out to pat my arm in a gesture of fake sympathy. "I know how much you wanted this building, but honestly, it is for the best. Preston's mother is flying down next week, and I needed to pop in today to visualize my aisle runner before she arrives. The chiffon draping needs to be perfectly aligned with the glass atrium. Panic flared in my chest again. If she started wandering the property visualizing chiffon, she would inevitably run into a staff member who might recognize the date discrepancy. I needed her out of the building immediately. I understand, I said, leaning into her profound narcissism. I know how important it is for you to impress Preston's family. You cannot leave any detail to chance. Exactly, Peyton agreed, puffing her chest out slightly. They expect a certain standard. I am not going to let them down. Then you should know that Beatrice is not in the building today, I lied, delivering the final, crucial piece of misdirection. She is at an off-site vendor conference. The junior staff working the desk cannot authorize a walking tour of the atrium without a manager present. They have a very strict insurance policy. Peyton groaned, dropping her head back in frustration. Are you kidding me? I drove all the way across town in this heat for nothing. They should really post their management schedules online. This is incredibly inconvenient. I nodded sympathetically, gently placing a hand on her shoulder and physically turning her toward the heavy mahogany exit doors. It is frustrating, I agreed, slowly guiding her toward the exit. But you want Beatrice here when you do your visualization anyway. She knows the lighting angles perfectly. You should call her tomorrow and schedule a formal walkthrough. Make sure you get the VIP treatment you deserve. Peyton sighed, yielding to my physical guidance. You are right. I need the manager, not some intern. I will just call tomorrow. We reached the entrance doors. The thick glass separated the cool lobby from the blazing summer heat. Peyton pushed the door open, a wave of humidity instantly washing over us. She paused on the threshold, turning back to look at me one last time. Thanks for being a good sport about all of this, Calixta, she said, her tone dripping with unearned superiority. I really am glad you finally learned to be a team player. I smiled my terrifying, genuine smile. I am always happy to play my part, Peyton. She turned and walked down the sweeping stone steps toward the parking lot, her sundress catching the hot breeze. I stood, perfectly still, in the air-conditioned lobby, watching her Mercedes navigate the long driveway and disappear through the security gates. My breath released in a long, shaky exhale. My hands, which had remained perfectly steady during the confrontation, began to tremble slightly. The near miss was catastrophic. If my reaction time had been a second slower, if Marcus had hesitated, if Beatrice had walked out of her office to grab a coffee, the entire 8-month trap would have detonated prematurely in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. I pulled my phone from my pocket and typed a rapid message to Marcus. Coast is clear. Bring the blueprints back. We need to finish this. The secret survived. The trap held firm. But the encounter in the lobby served as a chilling reminder of the razor-thin wire I was walking. Peyton was not just a passive participant in her own destruction. She was actively moving pieces on a board she did not understand. The tension in my chest settled into a hard, cold knot. The game was no longer a theoretical exercise. The collision was imminent, and there was no turning back. The stifling heat of August broke into the crisp, golden edge of September. Less than 6 weeks remained until October 14th. My corporate launch logistics operated with the precision of a Swiss watch. Liam and I secured our private villa reservations for December, ensuring our genuine happiness remained protected behind a reinforced wall of silence. I believed I had anticipated every possible angle of Peyton's destructive behavior. I believed the near miss in the lobby represented the peak of her audacity. I underestimated my sister's relentless need to consume my life. On a quiet Thursday morning, I sat at my desk reviewing catering invoices. My phone buzzed, displaying an incoming call from an Atlanta area code. The caller ID indicated Sylvia Rossi, the formidable owner of Maison Rossi, an exclusive bridal boutique in the Buckhead district. Sylvia did not merely sell dresses. She curated wearable art for the Southern elite. Securing a consultation appointment at Maison Rossi required a referral and a 12-month waiting list. I had booked my slot nearly a year ago, long before Peyton announced her engagement, paying a substantial deposit to reserve Sylvia's personal design time. I picked up the phone, expecting a standard confirmation call regarding my upcoming fitting. "Sylvia, good morning." "Calixta," Sylvia replied, her typically melodic voice laced with sharp professional tension. "I need to verify a highly irregular request regarding your account." My spine stiffened. I set my pen down. "What kind of request?" "I received a phone call 20 minutes ago from a woman claiming to be you," Sylvia explained. "She stated that you were canceling your custom bridal order. She then attempted to authorize the transfer of your entire deposit, along with your priority fitting appointment this Saturday, to a new client profile under the name Peyton Jones." A cold, familiar anger flooded my chest. Peyton was not satisfied with stealing my venue or demanding my vendors. She actively attempted to commit identity fraud, to hijack my highly coveted bridal appointment and seize the deposit money I had earned. She wanted to walk into the exclusive boutique I secured, utilizing funds I generated, to select a gown for the wedding date she stole from me. "She did not pass the security verification questions," Sylvia continued, her tone grim. When my floor manager asked for the last 4 digits of the credit card on file, the caller became highly agitated, demanded to speak to me, and then hung up. I immediately flagged your account for fraudulent activity. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling tiles. "Thank you for the alert, Sylvia." The caller was my older sister. There was a heavy pause on the line. Sylvia operated in high society circles. She understood the vicious nature of family politics better than most. "I am incredibly sorry, Calixta. That is a breathtaking breach of trust. Would you like me to ban her from the premises if she attempts to arrive on Saturday?" I considered the offer. I considered the fiery, chaotic satisfaction of a public confrontation. But engaging in a screaming match over a bridal gown felt beneath me. I did not need to fight Peyton. I simply needed to remove the floorboards while she was busy admiring the ceiling. "No," I said slowly, a new, brilliant strategy forming in my mind. "Do not ban her. Let her arrive." Sylvia let out a confused breath. "You want me to let her hijack your appointment?" "I want to pivot my order," I corrected. "I am no longer requiring a bridal gown for October 14th. I need a corporate evening gown, something architectural, matte black silk, structural shoulders, and heavy brushed gold accents, a dress that commands a room." Sylvia's confusion transformed into a low, appreciative hum. "A power pivot. I love it. We can absolutely utilize your existing deposit for a custom evening gown. It will be spectacular. But what about the appointment this Saturday? What do you want my staff to do when your sister arrives expecting a bridal consultation?" "Treat her exactly like any other unverified walk-in," I instructed, my voice cold and clinically detached. "Inform her she has no appointment on the books. Do not mention my name. Just uphold your standard security protocols." "Understood," Sylvia agreed, the professional edge returning to her voice. "We will see you next week for your corporate fitting, Calixta." I ended the call. Peyton thought she could execute a flawless theft via a 5-minute phone call. She thought her sheer entitlement would override strict corporate security measures. She was about to learn a very expensive lesson regarding the limits of her privilege. Saturday arrived. I spent the afternoon at a coffee shop with Liam, drafting press releases for my company launch. My phone remained silent. I knew Peyton would drive 2 hours to Atlanta. I knew she would strut into Maison Rossi, expecting champagne and fawning attendants. I knew exactly what awaited her. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone finally rang. It was not Peyton. It was our mother. I answered, bracing myself for the impact. "Hello, Mom." "Calixta Joanne!" Brenda shrieked, her voice vibrating with unfiltered rage. "What did you do to your sister?" I kept my tone perfectly level, projecting innocent confusion. "I am sitting in a coffee shop with Liam. I have not spoken to Peyton in weeks. What are you talking about?" "Do not play games with me," Brenda snapped. Peyton just called me in hysterics from the parking lot of Maison Rossi in Atlanta. She drove all the way up there for a bridal fitting, and the security guard publicly escorted her out of the building. They told her she had no appointment. They humiliated her in front of an entire showroom of wealthy clients. "That sounds like a scheduling error on Peyton's part," I replied calmly. "She should double-check her confirmation emails. High-end boutiques are very strict about walk-ins." "She did not schedule it," Brenda yelled, dropping the pretense entirely. "She was using your appointment slot. Since you are not getting married on October 14th anymore, Peyton assumed she could simply take over your deposit and utilize your design time. It makes perfect logistical sense. Why would you let an exclusive appointment go to waste?" The sheer delusion required to justify identity theft stunned me. "You mean she attempted to impersonate me over the phone to steal my financial deposit?" I clarified, refusing to let my mother soften the reality of the crime. "She is your sister," Brenda justified, her voice tight with defensive anger. "You are supposed to help her. You deliberately sabotaged her dress shopping experience out of pure jealousy. You called that boutique and told them to throw her out, just to punish her for having the wedding you wanted." I took a slow sip of my iced coffee. Liam watched me across the small cafe table, a proud, quiet smile playing on his lips. "I did not sabotage anything, Mom," I stated, engaging the absolute emotional detachment that protected me from her gaslighting. "I canceled my bridal order because I am not getting married that day. I repurposed my deposit for a corporate evening gown. I have no control over what Peyton does with her Saturday afternoons. If she attempts to claim resources that do not belong to her, she will face the consequences of her own actions. I cannot help what Peyton does." "You are a bitter, vindictive child," Brenda hissed. "Your sister is sobbing in her car because you refuse to show a single ounce of grace." "She is sobbing because she got caught lying to a security guard," I corrected. "I have to go, Mom. I have press releases to finish." I hung up the phone before she could launch another verbal assault. I set the device face down on the cafe table. The adrenaline faded, leaving a crisp, clear sense of absolute control. My family attempted to weaponize my emotions against me, hoping my anger would drag me into a chaotic, mudslinging fight. They did not understand that I was no longer fighting them. I was simply enforcing the boundaries of reality. Peyton could cry in her car. Brenda could scream into the void. Their delusions held no power over my bank accounts, my contracts, or my peace of mind. The dress appointment sabotage was a spectacular failure, serving as a brutal preview of the massive collision rapidly approaching. 6 weeks remained until October 14th. The storm was gathering speed, and my sister was steering her ship directly into the eye of the hurricane. The golden warmth of September gave way to the crisp, restless energy of October. The calendar pages flipped rapidly, marching relentlessly toward the 14th. My corporate launch demanded a staggering level of logistical coordination. I managed the delivery of a towering black and gold media wall, finalized the champagne inventory, and confirmed security protocols for the high-net-worth attendees. My professional life operated in a state of high-octane precision. My personal life, however, required an Oscar-worthy performance. I had to inhabit the role of the defeated, submissive sister to ensure the illusion held until the final moment. Friday, October 13th arrived, a superstitious date for an event built entirely on lies. Peyton hosted her rehearsal dinner at the Oakwood Country Club, the same establishment where our parents ambushed me 8 months prior. The symmetry felt poetic. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom, smoothing the fabric of a simple, understated charcoal dress. It was a garment designed to blend into the background, exactly what my family expected from me. Liam stepped up behind me, adjusting the collar of his suit jacket. He met my eyes in the mirror reflection. "You ready to play the part?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "I am ready to close the curtain," I replied, picking up my clutch. We drove to the country club, leaving the quiet sanctuary of our shared life to step onto my family's fabricated stage. The private dining room was suffocatingly humid, filled with 40 of Peyton's closest friends and Preston's intimidating New York relatives. The room smelled of heavy cologne and roasted tenderloin. Peyton wore a white silk jumpsuit, clutching a glass of Prosecco and laughing at a joke Preston's father made. She radiated a frantic, desperate energy, overcompensating to prove she belonged in their wealthy circle. Preston stood beside her, checking his watch every 5 minutes. He looked exhausted, disconnected, and entirely unaware that his fiancée had scammed a discount catering company and possessed no legal right to her wedding venue. Liam and I claimed seats at a table near the back corner, near the kitchen doors. Brenda spotted us and immediately marched over, her posture rigid with warning. "I am glad you decided to show up, Calixta," Brenda whispered, leaning down so the neighboring tables could not hear. "Do not cause a scene tonight. Preston's family is scrutinizing everything. Sit quietly, eat your dinner, and try to look happy for your sister." I offered her a tight, polite nod. "I will not cause a single problem, Mom. I promise." She walked away, satisfied with my apparent docility. The dinner service began, a slow parade of overpriced steaks and forced conversation. I picked at my food, keeping my expression neutral while the tension in the room thickened. When the dessert plates arrived, the clinking of a spoon against crystal commanded the room's attention. Thomas stood at the head table, raising his glass. The room quieted, turning their focus to the patriarch. "We are gathered here tonight to celebrate the union of two remarkable families," Thomas began, his voice booming with practiced authority. "Peyton has worked tirelessly to orchestrate a spectacular weekend. She secured the Savannah Botanical Estate, demonstrating her impeccable taste in venues and her unwavering commitment to excellence." A ripple of polite applause drifted through the room. I felt Liam's hand gently squeeze my knee under the table. Dramatic irony is a potent, intoxicating force. I sat in a room filled with lawyers, executives, and socialites, listening to my father praise my sister for stealing a building she could never legally enter. I knew the truth. I held the keys. Everyone else was simply applauding an empty room. Preston's father stood next, delivering a brief, formal toast welcoming Peyton to the family. He spoke heavily about legacy, honesty, and upholding their family name. The irony deepened, thick and suffocating. Finally, Peyton took the floor. She gripped the microphone tightly, her knuckles turning white. She delivered a rambling, emotional speech thanking Preston, thanking his parents, and praising her own flawless planning skills. Then, her gaze sought me out in the back corner of the room. A predatory, triumphant gleam lit up her eyes. "I want to take a special moment to thank my little sister Calixta," Peyton announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Planning a wedding is incredibly stressful, and Calixta made a massive sacrifice for me earlier this year. She graciously gave up her dream so I could have mine. She stepped aside, and I will never forget that generosity." The entire room turned to look at me, offering a smattering of condescending, sympathetic applause. They viewed me as the tragic, accommodating sibling. I did not flinch. I did not look away. I maintained a serene, polite smile. Under the table, out of sight of the cameras and the staring eyes, I held my phone. A text message glowed on the screen from Marcus, my lead production designer. "Security team is briefed. Staging crew is assembling at the warehouse, confirming final load and authorization for 0400 hours at the Botanical Estate." While Peyton basked in the stolen glory of a fake venue, I typed a single, decisive word: confirmed. The toasts concluded. The room dissolved into mingling and the consumption of more alcohol. I excused myself, navigating the crowded room toward the restroom. The country club bathrooms featured marble countertops and harsh, bright vanity lights. I stood at the sink, running cold water over my wrists to cool my racing pulse. The heavy wooden doors swung open, and Peyton walked in. We were entirely alone. She leaned against the marble counter, examining her reflection in the mirror, touching up her lipstick. The facade of the grateful sister vanished, replaced by the smug, entitled reality I knew intimately. "You handled the toasts well," Peyton said, capping her lipstick. "I was worried you might cry or throw a fit in front of Preston's mother." I dried my hands on a linen towel. I promised Mom I would not cause a scene. Peyton sighed, a dramatic, performative sound. I know this must be agonizing for you. I really do hope it is not too hard to watch me tomorrow. Walking down that grand glass aisle, standing exactly where you wanted to stand. It takes a lot of strength to witness someone else live out your dream. She wanted me to break. She wanted me to confess my pain, to validate her victory by displaying my devastation. She needed my tears to cement her triumph. I tossed the linen towel into the brass hamper. I turned to face her, closing the physical distance between us until I stood mere inches away. I looked her dead in the eye. I did not summon fake tears. I did not offer a submissive nod. I flashed a terrifying, genuine smile. It was a smile born of absolute certainty and quiet, devastating power. "Do not worry about me, Peyton," I said, my voice smooth and chillingly calm. "Tomorrow is going to be exactly what you deserve." Peyton blinked, momentarily taken aback by the intensity in my eyes. Her mind, clouded by months of unchecked narcissism and an echo chamber of lies, failed to register the threat. She interpreted my words through the filter of her own delusion. She assumed I meant she deserved a beautiful wedding. She absorbed the statement as a twisted form of submissive acceptance. "Thank you, Calixta," she replied, patting my arm patronizingly. "I will see you at the estate tomorrow. Do not be late." She turned and exited the restroom, her heels clicking victoriously against the tile. I remained in the quiet, bright space for a moment longer. I checked my watch. 9:30 in the evening. The rehearsal dinner illusion was complete. The final performance was over. I walked back into the dining room, located Liam, and nodded toward the exit. We slipped out the side doors without saying goodbye to my parents or Preston's family. We stepped into the cool, dark Georgia night. The humidity had broken, leaving behind a sharp, bracing chill. I slid into the passenger seat of Liam's car. The engine hummed to life, cutting through the silence of the parking lot. "Did you say goodbye to the bride?" Liam asked, navigating toward the main road. "I gave her my final regards," I replied, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. The adrenaline that had sustained me for 8 months shifted, morphing into a cold, sharp focus. The waiting was over. The planning was complete. I closed my eyes, mentally running through the logistical timeline for the next 10 hours. I was no longer the defeated sister attending a rehearsal dinner. I was the CEO preparing for a launch. I was stepping onto a battlefield I had designed perfectly. I was ready for war. The chronological loop closed, bringing me back to the cold, damp morning of Saturday, October 14th. 6 o'clock in the morning. I stood inside the sprawling glass atrium of the Savannah Botanical Estate, a mug of dark roast coffee in my hand. The quiet stillness of the early hours shattered against the intense, synchronized chaos of my corporate load-in. Dozens of production crew members swarmed the property. Technicians suspended heavy lighting rigs from the vaulted glass ceiling, casting harsh white work beams across the marble floors. Event staff unfurled massive rolls of matte black draping, securing them against the estate's classic white columns. A pristine red carpet rolled out from the main entrance, cutting a path through the manicured courtyard. This was not a wedding. This was a fortress of corporate branding. I set my coffee mug down on a nearby staging crate, my phone buzzing against the wood. The call from my lead florist echoed in my memory. Peyton was outside. She had arrived in her Vera Wang gown, dragging 2 sleepy bridesmaids behind her, expecting to access the bridal suite for hair and makeup. She was currently screaming at the gate intercom, demanding the removal of my company logos. The psychological blockade I had established with Beatrice, the venue manager, functioned flawlessly. Beatrice was not on site yet. The only people operating the perimeter were the private security contractors I had hired through Joan & Company. They were off-duty local police officers, men who did not care about Savannah high society politics. They cared about legal lease agreements and property rights. I picked up my 2-way radio headset, pressing the communication button. Security Post 1, this is Calixta. Hold the woman in the bridal gown at the exterior gate. Do not engage with her verbal demands. Under no circumstances does she cross the perimeter line. Copy that, Joan and Company, the gruff voice of the head guard crackled back through the earpiece. We have her contained at the visitor call box. I exhaled a slow, steady breath. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. Now I needed to systematically remove her remaining lifelines. At 6:45, the heavy rumble of a diesel engine disrupted the quiet morning. I walked out of the glass atrium, stepping onto the front portico. Through the wrought iron bars of the main gate, I spotted a beat-up, mid-tier catering box truck idling in the driveway. The side panels displayed a faded logo for an all-in-one event service company. This was the discount vendor Peyton had hired online. The company she bragged about securing after my preferred vendors legally rejected her. They were scheduled to deliver her fragile, blush pink floral arrangements and begin prepping a subpar buffet for 150 wealthy New York guests. The driver, a tired-looking man in a wrinkled polo shirt, threw the truck into park and hopped out. He approached the security post, holding a crumpled clipboard. Peyton, who had been pacing near her parked Mercedes, immediately rushed toward him, her bridal gown dragging across the damp asphalt. Finally, Peyton yelled, waving her arms frantically, "You need to tell these idiot guards to open the gate. We are running behind schedule and the venue management is completely incompetent." The driver looked at Peyton, then looked at the 3 armed, uniformed guards blocking the entrance. Confusion etched deep lines into his forehead. He approached the wrought iron bars hesitantly. "I have a delivery and service order for the Joan wedding," the driver announced to the head guard, tapping his clipboard. I pushed open the heavy mahogany doors of the estate lobby and walked down the stone steps. I approached the gate from the interior, maintaining a calm, authoritative pace. I carried a sleek, black leather binder containing my corporate event permits. I signaled for the guard to slide open the pedestrian access gate just enough for me to step through, instantly blocking Peyton's path. "Are you the vendor contracted by Peyton Joan?" I asked the driver, keeping my voice loud enough to carry over the rumble of his idling truck. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, looking nervously between me, Peyton, and the armed security. "Calixta, what are you doing?" Peyton demanded, her voice shrill with rising panic. "Why are you out here? Tell them to open the gates. Preston's family is going to be here in a few hours." I ignored her entirely, focusing my attention solely on the vendor. "Sir, I am Calixta Joan, the CEO of Joan and Company. I am the sole legal leaseholder of the Savannah Botanical Estate for the next 24 hours. This property is currently a closed, private, corporate event space." I opened my leather binder, extracting a single sheet of heavy legal paper. I handed it through the iron bars to the driver. "This is a formal, legally binding trespass notice," I stated clearly. "You are not an authorized vendor for this property. If you attempt to cross this gate or unload any equipment onto this estate, you will be immediately cited for criminal trespassing by the off-duty officers standing behind me, and your vehicle will be impounded." The driver stared at the document. He read the bold, stark legal language. He looked at the off-duty police officers resting their hands near their duty belts. He operated a discount, high-volume event service. He did not possess the financial resources or the legal backing to fight a trespassing charge at an exclusive private estate. "Wait!" Peyton shrieked, lunging forward to grab the driver's arm. "You cannot leave. I paid you a $20,000 deposit. We have a contract. You have to feed my guests." The driver gently shook her hand off his arm. He looked at Peyton with a mixture of pity and intense self-preservation. "Lady, my contract says I provide service at a legally secured venue. You clearly do not have the venue. I am not getting arrested for a catering gig." He handed the trespass notice back to me. "Sorry for the confusion, ma'am. We are leaving." "No, no, no!" Peyton screamed, her voice cracking as the driver turned his back on her. "You have to stay. You cannot do this." The driver climbed into the cab of his box truck. He slammed the door shut, grinding the gears into reverse. The diesel engine roared as he backed down the long driveway, turning onto the main road and disappearing from sight. Because Peyton had signed a standard service contract containing a venue liability clause, the vendor was entirely within his legal rights to abandon the job upon being denied entry. Because the failure to secure the location fell squarely on Peyton, the vendor legally retained her entire $20,000 non-refundable deposit. Peyton stood in the center of the asphalt driveway, her custom Vera Wang gown absorbing the damp morning dew. She stared at the empty road where her catering truck had vanished. Her carefully constructed, fragile delusion was collapsing around her, piece by piece, exactly as I had designed. She spun around to face me, her eyes wide, wild, and bloodshot. "You did this," she breathed, her voice trembling. "You canceled my vendors. You hijacked the gate. You are ruining my wedding day." I stepped back through the pedestrian access gate, allowing the heavy iron bars to slide shut and lock with a definitive metallic clang. "You never had a wedding day, Peyton," I replied, my voice echoing through the iron bars. "You had a fantasy. I have a lease." I turned my back on her and walked up the sweeping stone steps. The morning sun began to breach the horizon, casting long, sharp shadows across the estate. The trap had effectively stripped her of her resources. She possessed no food, no floral arrangements, no chairs, and no legal entry. She was completely isolated in a parking lot. I walked into the bridal suite, a room I had repurposed into my corporate command center. My custom architectural matte black silk evening gown hung from a brass rack. Heavy brushed gold accents caught the light. The dress did not symbolize a fragile bride. It symbolized a woman who owned the building. I unzipped my practical load and clothes and stepped into the silk gown. The fabric settled against my skin, cool and empowering. I fastened the gold cuffs, smoothed the structural shoulders, and clipped my two-way communication headset over my ear. The storm was no longer gathering on the horizon. It was making landfall, and I was standing safely inside the lighthouse, waiting to watch her drown. The morning sun climbed higher into the Georgia sky, burning off the remaining dew and intensifying the sticky, suffocating humidity. Inside the climate-controlled glass atrium, my corporate launch preparations moved with ruthless efficiency. The matte black velvet linens were draped perfectly. The towering gold branches reflected the strategically placed amber lighting. I stood on the second-floor interior balcony, nursing a fresh bottle of sparkling water. From this elevated vantage point, the security camera monitors displayed every angle of the exterior perimeter. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the situation in the visitor parking lot devolved from a localized panic attack into a full-scale crisis. Peyton paced the asphalt like a caged animal. Her pristine white gown accumulated streaks of dirt along the hem. Her two bridesmaids huddled near a parked car, furiously typing on their cell phones, attempting to salvage a disaster they did not comprehend. A sleek silver Mercedes-Benz tore around the corner of the access road, taking the turn far too fast. The tires squealed against the pavement as the vehicle lurched to a halt directly behind Peyton. My parents had arrived. Thomas and Brenda burst from the car doors before the engine even cut off. Brenda wore a pale lavender suit, her hair sprayed into an immaculate, unmoving helmet. Thomas wore a custom-tailored morning coat, his face flushed in angry, mottled red. Peyton ran toward them, launching herself into Brenda's arms. Her manicured facade shattered entirely. She sobbed, pointing wildly toward the massive wrought iron gates and the armed security guards standing behind them. I watched the silent pantomime on the security feed, reading my family's predictable reactions. Peyton played the victim. Brenda offered fierce, irrational maternal protection. Thomas immediately assumed the role of the conquering patriarch, preparing to bulldoze any obstacle in his path. Thomas adjusted his suit jacket, jutting his jaw forward, and marched directly toward the main pedestrian access gate. I leaned closer to the monitor, switching the audio feed from the exterior security post to my earpiece. The sound of crickets and distant highway traffic filtered through, accompanied by my father's booming, authoritative voice. "What is the meaning of this?" Thomas demanded, addressing the head security guard. "Why are my daughter and her bridal party being held outside their own venue? Open these gates immediately. We have vendors arriving and an entire timeline to maintain." The head guard, a broad-shouldered man named Davis, who had served 15 years on the local police force, did not flinch. He remained planted in the center of the walkway, his arms resting casually against his tactical vest. "Sir, this is a private corporate event," Davis stated, his tone flat and unbothered by my father's attempted intimidation. "The property is secured for the duration of the day. You are not on the authorized guest list. I need you to step back from the perimeter." Thomas let out a short, incredulous laugh. He was a man accustomed to commanding respect in country club dining rooms and law offices. He believed his sheer presence carried legal weight. "You clearly do not know who I am," Thomas barked, his voice rising in volume. "I am Thomas Joan. This wedding is merging my family with one of the most prominent legal families in New York. We paid $15,000 for this venue. You are severely jeopardizing your employment by blocking our access. Open the gate, or I will have you fired by the estate management within the hour." Davis slowly shook his head, a faint, humorless smile touching the corner of his mouth. He raised his right hand and pointed a thick finger toward a small, sleek black box mounted into the stone pillar beside the iron bars. The biometric scanner. "I do not care who you are, sir," Davis replied, delivering the fatal, inevitable blow. "Estate management does not control access today. My client holds the exclusive lease. Unless you magically possess Calixta Jones' fingerprints to activate that biometric scanner, this gate stays locked. Now, step away from the bars before I cite you for loitering on a private drive." Thomas froze. The color drained from his flushed face, leaving him a sickly, pale white. The name registered in his brain, colliding violently with the reality he thought he controlled. Behind him, Brenda stopped consoling Peyton. Her head snapped toward the gate. "Calixta," she repeated, the word sounding like a curse. My phone began to vibrate violently in my hand. Brenda was calling. I watched the security monitor as she furiously tapped her phone screen, pacing behind Thomas. I did not answer. The call rolled to voicemail. Seconds later, a notification popped up. Then another. Then a third. I opened my voicemail inbox and hit play. Brenda's voice shrieked through the small speaker, shrill and unhinged. "Calixta Joan, pick up this phone right now. There is a massive glitch at the estate. The guards are confused. They are claiming you hold the lease. You promised you gave up this venue. Fix this error immediately." Peyton is hyperventilating. Preston's family will be here in a few hours. Call the manager and clear this up. She left 3 identical, frantic voicemails, each escalating in volume and desperation. She still refused to believe I possessed the capacity to outmaneuver her. She clung to the idea that this was a clerical error, a simple misunderstanding that could be bullied into submission. I waited 5 full minutes. I let the panic simmer in the parking lot. I let Peyton's makeup run and my father's pride fracture. Then I dialed Brenda's number. She answered on the first ring. "Calixta," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Where are you? Call the management office right now. Tell them you canceled 8 months ago." "I am standing on the interior balcony of the atrium, Mom," I said, projecting my voice clearly. My tone remained frigid, a stark contrast to her hysteria. Brenda gasped. "You are inside? Then go down to the gate and let us in. These guards are insane." "There is no glitch, Mom," I stated, cutting through her frantic commands. "The guards are executing my exact orders. I never canceled my contract. I repurposed it. I deposited your $15,000 check into my corporate account as a relinquishment fee, effectively funding the massive branding launch currently taking place inside this building." A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the phone line. On the security monitor, I watched Brenda lower the phone from her ear, hitting the speakerphone button so Thomas and Peyton could hear my words. "You lied to us," Thomas roared into the speaker, stepping closer to Brenda. "You took my money and you lied." I never lied, Dad, I corrected smoothly. You handed me a check and demanded I step aside. I wrote you a receipt for a date-hold relinquishment. You assume that meant cancellation because you never bother to read the details when you think you have already won. I simply shifted the nature of my lease. You cannot do this, Peyton shrieked, launching herself toward the phone. This is my wedding day. Preston's family is flying in. The invitations went out months ago. You mailed invitations for a building you never legally leased, Peyton, I replied, my voice echoing with finality. You hired a fake caterer because you were too arrogant to realize my vendors were contractually locked. Your fragile blush-pink delusion is currently shattering against a very real, very legal wall. This is fraud, Brenda screamed, her voice tearing at the seams. You stole from us. You hijacked this property. I am calling the police. I am having you arrested for theft and trespassing. I smiled, looking down at the pristine black and gold corporate stage being assembled below me. Please do, Mom, I offered cheerfully. The non-emergency dispatch number for the Savannah Police Department is 912-555-0188. Tell them to send a squad car. I have a binder full of legally binding, non-transferable lease documents waiting for them. And if Peyton wants to get married today, I highly suggest you start looking for an available public park. I ended the call. I watched the monitor as Brenda hurled her phone onto the asphalt in a fit of pure, unadulterated rage. The device shattered, a fitting metaphor for the destruction of their manufactured reality. My parents had spent my entire life dictating the terms of my existence, demanding I shrink to accommodate my sister's sprawling entitlement. They believed their wealth and social standing granted them immunity from consequence. They were currently trapped in a parking lot, staring at a locked gate, realizing that the daughter they treated as a footnote had just rewritten the entire book. The initial breach failed, the perimeter held. But the collision was far from over. My father was a man who viewed surrender as a terminal illness. He would not walk away quietly. He would escalate the situation, dragging the authorities into the fray, convinced his reputation could bend the law. I poured myself another glass of sparkling water, welcoming the approaching sirens. The real show was about to begin. The Savannah morning dragged into late forenoon, the temperature steadily climbing, baking the asphalt in the visitor parking lot. 11 o'clock arrived. Inside the glass atrium, the lighting technicians finalized their focus, bathing the matte black walls in a sharp, professional glow. The catering staff began unboxing crystal glassware. Everything operated in a state of controlled, beautiful perfection. Outside, chaos reigned supreme. I watched the security monitor as Thomas marched away from the shattered remains of Brenda's cell phone. He pulled his own phone from his suit jacket, his thumb jabbing the screen with furious intent. He was pacing, gesturing wildly toward the locked gates, shouting into the receiver. He had called the police. My father operated under the distinct impression that law enforcement existed to serve as a private concierge service for the wealthy. He genuinely believed he could summon officers to strong-arm a private security detail into unlocking a gate simply because he felt entitled to the property behind it. He was about to experience a harsh lesson regarding the limitations of country club influence against concrete legal documentation. 15 minutes later, the wail of sirens pierced the quiet upscale neighborhood. 2 Savannah Police Department cruisers turned onto the long driveway, their blue and red lights flashing against the wrought iron perimeter. The cruisers parked at sharp angles, boxing in my parents' silver Mercedes. 4 uniformed officers stepped out of the vehicles. They approached the scene with a cautious, professional detachment, their hands resting near their radios. They encountered a bizarre tableau. Peyton sat on the hood of the Mercedes in a ruined, tear-stained Vera Wang gown, weeping openly. Brenda stood beside her, fanning herself frantically, looking as though she might faint from the sheer indignity of the situation. Thomas rushed toward the lead officer, pointing an accusing finger at Davis, my head security guard. Officer, thank God you are here, Thomas barked, launching immediately into his fabricated narrative. We have been the victims of a severe property hijack. This man and his rogue security team are illegally barricading us from a venue I paid $15,000 to secure for my daughter's wedding today. The guests arrive in a few hours. I need these gates opened and these guards removed from the premises immediately. The lead officer, a seasoned veteran with a graying mustache, held up a hand, halting my father's tirade. Sir, please lower your voice. Who exactly are these guards, and who do they claim to be working for? They claim to be working for my youngest daughter, Calixta, Thomas spat, the name tasting sour in his mouth. She is executing some sort of vindictive, illegal corporate takeover of my eldest daughter's wedding reservation. It is pure fraud. Davis did not interject. He simply stood at parade rest behind the iron bars, knowing his role was to maintain the perimeter while I handled the legal dispute. I decided it was time to close the trap. I picked up my heavy black leather binder, smoothing the silk skirt of my evening gown. I walked away from the security monitor, descending the grand sweeping staircase of the atrium. I pushed open the heavy mahogany doors and stepped out into the blazing midday sun. I walked down the long paved portico toward the front gates. The sharp, rhythmic clicking of my heels echoed across the pavement, drawing the attention of every person in the parking lot. The scene was intensely cinematic. The flashing blue lights of the police cruisers cast strange, dancing shadows against the manicured hedges. My family looked disheveled, frantic, and completely unhinged. I approached the gate, projecting an aura of absolute, clinical detachment. I was not a daughter engaging in a family squabble. I was a chief executive officer defending my corporate territory. Officers, good morning, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the iron bars. I am Calixta Joan. I hold the sole legal lease for this property. The lead officer stepped toward the gate, sizing me up. He noted the professional security detail, my structural designer gown, and the distinct lack of panic in my demeanor. Ma'am, this gentleman claims he paid $15,000 for this venue and that you are illegally locking out a scheduled wedding. He is lying. She stole it from me, Peyton screamed from the hood of the car, her voice cracking. Make her open the gate. I ignored Peyton entirely. I opened my leather binder, resting it against the iron bars so the officer could clearly view the contents. I did not steal anything, I explained smoothly. This is a private corporate branding launch for Joan & Company. Here is the original notarized lease agreement with the Savannah Botanical Estate. You will note the clause highlighting that the lease is strictly non-transferable and non-refundable. The signature on the bottom is mine. The officer leaned close, reviewing the document. He nodded, recognizing the standard legal formatting. My father surged forward, pressing his face near the bars. Do not listen to her. Show them the check, Calixta. Show them the $15,000 I paid you to surrender this building to Peyton 8 months ago. I turned the page in my binder. I anticipated this exact accusation. I am happy to provide full financial transparency, officer, I said, presenting the next document. Here is a copy of the receipt I provided to Thomas Joan 8 months ago. Please read the specific terminology on the memo line. The officer adjusted his radio strap, reading the text aloud. Consulting and date hold relinquishment fee. Exactly, I confirmed, my gaze shifting to meet my father's horrified eyes. I relinquished the hold on a private marital ceremony. I utilized those funds to pivot my existing non-transferable lease into a corporate gala. I never canceled the contract. Thomas Joan made a $15,000 business donation to my limited liability company. No legal transfer of property rights ever occurred. The officer stepped back, digesting the information. He looked at my pristine, airtight paperwork. He looked at my armed, off-duty police security detail. Then he looked at Thomas, Brenda, and the weeping bride on the car hood. The situation crystallized in the officer's mind. This was not a property hijack. This was a family that had been legally outmaneuvered, attempting to use the police department to force a breach of contract. Mr. Joan, the lead officer said, his tone shifting from cautious inquiry to stern reprimand. The documentation is exceedingly clear. Ms. Joan is the sole legal leaseholder for this estate today. You hold a receipt for a consulting fee, not a property deed. You have no legal standing to access these grounds. "This is absurd," Brenda shrieked, clutching her lavender lapels. "You cannot just leave us out here. We have 150 high-profile guests arriving soon. We need this building." "Ma'am," the officer replied firmly, "this is a civil dispute regarding your family dynamics and financial agreements. It is not a criminal matter, and the police department cannot force a leaseholder to open her gates. In fact, because Ms. Joan has a secured perimeter and formal permits for a private event, you are currently trespassing." The word hung in the humid air, heavy and absolute. Trespassing. "I need you and your party to vacate the visitor parking lot immediately," the officer commanded, gesturing toward their silver Mercedes. "If you remain on the premises and continue to harass the security detail or the leaseholder, we will be forced to issue formal citations and begin making arrests." Thomas staggered backward as if he had been physically struck. The patriarch who ruled his country club empire with an iron fist had just been publicly dressed down and ordered off a driveway by a local beat cop. The reality of his absolute powerlessness crushed him. Peyton slid off the hood of the car, her knees buckling slightly. She realized with devastating finality that no amount of screaming, crying, or parental intervention could unlock those gates. The wedding was dead. As my parents stumbled toward their vehicle in a haze of shock and humiliation, the ultimate layer of the trap snapped shut. A sleek black utility van pulled into the estate driveway, parking directly behind the police cruisers. The side of the van displayed the logo for Savannah's premier lifestyle news network. The media crew I had invited to cover my corporate launch had arrived early to capture B-roll footage of the exterior setup. 2 cameramen hopped out of the van, hoisting heavy, high-definition broadcasting cameras onto their shoulders. They immediately recognized the chaotic scene unfolding before them. A weeping bride in a filthy Vera Wang gown, a furious father arguing with police officers, and a serene CEO standing behind a locked gate in a custom evening dress. It was journalistic gold. The cameras began rolling. The red recording lights blinked aggressively in the midday sun. They captured high-definition footage of my father being ordered into his car by law enforcement. They captured Brenda shielding her face with her designer handbag. Most devastatingly, they captured Peyton, the golden child obsessed with her flawless social image, being officially escorted away from her fake wedding venue by the police, her mascara running in thick black rivers down her cheeks. I stood behind the iron bars, watching the media crew document the total destruction of my family's fabricated reality. The police had neutralized the physical threat, but the social consequences were just beginning to gather momentum. The Mercedes finally peeled out of the parking lot, the news cameras tracking its retreat down the highway. The visitor area fell quiet, save for the hum of the remaining cruiser engines. The lead officer approached the gate one last time, tipping his hat toward me. "Sorry for the disturbance, Ms. Joan. Have a successful event today." "Thank you, officer," I replied, my voice steady. I turned my back on the empty parking lot and walked up the portico steps, retreating into the cool, dark embrace of my corporate fortress. The preliminary skirmish was over. The physical breach had failed, but the true devastation lay ahead. The police had removed my immediate family, but they could not remove the 150 wealthy, oblivious guests currently dressing in their finest formal wear, preparing to descend upon a wedding that did not exist. The climax was merely pausing for intermission. The real audience was about to arrive. The humid midday air baked the asphalt as the clock crept toward 2:30 in the afternoon. Inside the cool, amber-lit sanctuary of the glass atrium, my corporate production team ran through their final technical checks. Waitstaff finalized the raw oyster bars. The string quartet tuned their instruments, preparing to play sharp, modern arrangements for my incoming media guests. Outside the gates, the environment prepared for a radically different collision. The Savannah Police Department cruisers had departed, leaving my private security detail to manage the perimeter. I instructed Davis and his team to construct a physical barricade across the primary entrance using heavy black velvet stanchions. Behind the ropes, we illuminated a massive digital marquee sign. The bright LED letters burned through the afternoon glare, broadcasting a clear, undeniable message. Joan & Company, elevating modern luxury, private corporate event, authorized entry only. I stood on the second-floor interior balcony again, watching the security feeds as the first wave of Peyton's oblivious wedding guests arrived. They pulled into the visitor parking lot in sleek sedans and rented town cars, men wearing expensive summer suits and women navigating the gravel in precarious designer heels. They carried wrapped gifts and envelopes thick with cash, expecting to attend the social event of the season. Instead, they encountered a wall of armed security guards and a glaring corporate billboard. Confusion rippled through the gathering crowd. Guests checked their gold-foiled invitations, comparing the ornate cursive text against the stark, modern reality of the barricade. They huddled in small groups, whispering frantically, attempting to decipher why a botanical estate they assumed was hosting a lavish, blush-pink wedding currently resembled a high-security corporate summit. A sharp black caravan of 3 luxury SUVs turned onto the access road, dominating the driveway. The vehicles possessed dark-tinted windows and diplomatic license plates. Preston and his formidable New York family had arrived. The SUVs parked near the barricade. Preston emerged from the lead vehicle wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than my first car. His parents stepped out of the second vehicle. His father, the intimidating contract law attorney, adjusted his silver-rimmed glasses, surveying the chaotic parking lot with an expression of immediate, profound distaste. Before Preston could even approach the security guards to demand an explanation, a beat-up silver Mercedes swerved back into the parking lot. Peyton, Thomas, and Brenda had been idling at a nearby gas station, waiting for Preston's arrival, desperate to intercept him before he learned the truth. Peyton practically threw herself out of the passenger door before the car fully stopped. Her Vera Wang gown, already ruined by dirt and tears, now looked like a tragic costume. She sprinted across the asphalt, launching herself at Preston. "Preston, thank God you are here," she shrieked, her voice carrying over the murmurs of the confused guests. "You have to fix this. My sister has lost her mind. She hacked the venue." Preston caught her by the arm, steadying her frantic movements. He looked deeply uncomfortable, hyper-aware of the 150 high society guests watching his bride unravel in a parking lot. "Peyton, calm down," Preston commanded, his voice tight and controlled. "What do you mean she hacked the venue? Why are we locked out? Where is the event coordinator?" "She bribed the security," Peyton sobbed, weaving a new, desperate lie. "She used her event planning connections to lock us out of our own wedding. She is holding our building hostage. You need your father to threaten to sue them. Make them open the gates." Preston's father stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the heavy digital marquee and the professional security detail. He did not see a hacked venue or bribed guards. He saw a legally secured perimeter. I decided it was time to provide the defense's opening statement. I walked down the grand staircase, stepping out of the glass atrium and onto the portico. I approached the wrought iron gate, holding my black leather binder. The murmurs in the parking lot died instantly. 150 heads turned to watch me approach, a stark figure in a matte black evening gown cutting through the suffocating Georgia heat. I stopped at the gate, directly across from Preston and his father. "There was no hack, Preston," I said, pitching my voice to ensure the surrounding guests could hear every syllable. "There was no bribery. There is only a lease." Preston glared at me, his jaw clenching. "Calixta, this is incredibly inappropriate. Whatever petty sibling rivalry you have with Peyton, you cannot hijack our wedding day. Open the gate." "I did not hijack your wedding day," I replied smoothly, "because you never had a wedding day. You have been funding a delusion for 8 months. Peyton shrieked again, attempting to lunge forward, but Preston held her back. Do not listen to her, Preston. She is lying. She is just jealous. Preston's father bypassed the emotional hysteria entirely. He approached the iron bars, his legal mind overriding any familial loyalty. Ms. Joan, he stated, his voice a low, authoritative rumble, if you are claiming legal possession of this property, I expect you can provide the documentation to support such a brazen claim. I smiled. It was the moment I had anticipated since February. Certainly, sir, I replied. I opened the binder and slipped the notarized lease agreement through the narrow gap in the iron bars. Preston's father took the heavy paper, pulling his silver glasses down the bridge of his nose to read the fine print. Preston leaned over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the document. I watched the exact moment the truth detonated in Preston's mind. He read the date. He read the non-transferable clause. He read the exclusive biometric security requirement. He saw my signature at the bottom, dated 8 months prior to the invitations Peyton mailed out. Because Preston was raised by a contract law attorney, he possessed the education required to immediately understand the reality of the document. He did not need a judge to interpret the legalese. He recognized an airtight, ironclad corporate lease when he saw one. Preston slowly lowered the paper. He turned to look at Peyton. The uncomfortable embarrassment he felt moments ago vanished, replaced by a cold, hollow shock. You never booked this venue, Preston stated, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I did, Peyton cried, her tears flowing freely now. I did book it. She stole it back. She did not steal it back, Peyton, Preston said, his voice rising in volume, the anger finally breaking through his composed facade. This lease is dated February. You sent out the invitations in May. You spent my money printing announcements for a building you never legally secured. I tried to get it, Peyton pleaded, reaching for his hands. Mom and Dad gave her a check. She was supposed to cancel. We thought she canceled. Preston recoiled from her touch as if she had burned him. You thought she canceled. You did not verify the contract. You did not secure a secondary location. You lied to me. You lied to my family. You told us the logistics were flawless. I wanted everything to be perfect for you, Peyton sobbed, collapsing onto her knees on the asphalt. Preston looked down at her, a mixture of pity and intense, unadulterated disgust twisting his features. He realized he was not looking at a capable, sophisticated partner. He was looking at a pathological liar who had orchestrated a massive financial and social fraud simply to maintain her own fragile ego. He realized she had intentionally humiliated his family in front of their peers. Perfect, Preston repeated, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. You are currently trespassing on private corporate property in a wedding gown with no caterer, no flowers, and no legal right to exist here. You are a liability, Peyton. Preston, please, Brenda begged, rushing forward to grab his arm. She made a mistake. We can fix this. We can find another venue right now. We can move the party. Preston shook her hand off his jacket. There is no party, Brenda, and there is no wedding. He turned his back on the weeping bride. He looked at his father, who simply nodded in silent agreement, already stepping back toward their black SUV. I am done, Preston announced to the silent, staring crowd. He walked back to his vehicle, climbed into the back seat, and slammed the heavy door shut. His parents followed suit. The engines of the 3 luxury SUVs roared to life. They executed a sharp, coordinated 3-point turn in the middle of the visitor lot. They drove away, the tires crunching against the gravel, leaving the estate entirely behind them. Peyton remained on her knees on the hot asphalt, sobbing into her hands. Thomas and Brenda stood frozen, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the social destruction unfolding around them. 150 prominent guests stood in awkward, horrified silence, watching the engagement dissolve in real time. They realized they were dressed in formal wear for a stolen, non-existent event. I stood safely behind my locked iron gates, the corporate binder resting comfortably in my hands. The old money had arrived, evaluated the fraud, and departed. The secondary collision had shattered the final remnants of Peyton's delusion. The climax was reaching its devastating peak, and the transition of absolute power was nearly complete. My launch was about to begin. The afternoon shadows lengthened across the Savannah Botanical Estate, offering a brief respite from the punishing Georgia heat. At exactly 4 o'clock, the atmosphere shifted entirely. The chaotic, tragic spectacle in the visitor parking lot gave way to an orchestrated display of absolute wealth and precision. The primary security detail, having successfully mitigated the physical threat of my family and the abandoned wedding guests, transitioned into their secondary protocol. They utilized the black velvet stanchions to establish a clear, unimpeded VIP lane leading directly to the red carpet. My corporate guests began to arrive. This was not a collection of confused relatives holding wedding gifts. This was a highly curated roster of Savannah's business elite. Real estate developers, tech entrepreneurs, local politicians, and prominent lifestyle influencers pulled into the designated valet circle in luxury vehicles. They emerged wearing sharp, modern cocktail attire, projecting power and anticipating a spectacular branding event. They walked the red carpet, stopping to pose for the high-definition media cameras positioned in front of my massive 20-foot step-and-repeat board. The matte black backdrop, emblazoned with the Joan & Company logo in brushed gold, served as a stark, undeniable declaration of my professional territory. Inside the glass atrium, the execution was flawless. I stood near the entrance, greeting my arriving clients with a serene, confident smile. The environment smelled of expensive catering and fresh, structural orchids. The lighting technicians had bathed the room in a warm, amber glow that reflected beautifully against the black velvet linens and gold centerpieces. The string quartet, the very musicians Peyton had arrogantly assumed she could hijack, played a modern, driving arrangement that set an energized, triumphant tempo for the evening. Every detail functioned precisely as I had designed it over the last 8 months. The transition from a personal wedding date into a corporate fortress was complete. At 5 o'clock, the ambient music faded. A spotlight cut through the amber lighting, illuminating a sleek, clear acrylic podium positioned at the center of the atrium floor. The low murmur of networking executives quieted as I walked toward the stage. My matte black silk evening gown moved fluidly, the heavy gold structural accents catching the spotlight. I stepped up to the podium, looking out over the crowd of 250 influential guests. I spotted Liam sitting in the front row, his dark suit impeccable, a look of quiet, immense pride radiating from his eyes. "Good evening," I began, my voice amplified clearly across the silent room. "Thank you for joining me to celebrate the 5-year anniversary and official brand relaunch of Joan & Company." A wave of respectful applause filled the atrium. I waited for it to subside before continuing. "Building a luxury event firm in the South requires more than just an eye for design," I said, projecting absolute authority. "It requires a relentless commitment to structural integrity. It requires understanding that true elegance is never chaotic. It is deliberate. It is protected." I paused, letting my gaze sweep over the room, ensuring I connected with the local media reporters seated near the front. In this industry, we encounter countless individuals attempting to construct beautiful facades on unstable ground, I continued, the double entendre landing smoothly for anyone paying close attention. They rely on assumptions, borrowed resources, and the fragile hope that their lack of preparation will not be exposed. But at Joan & Company, we operate differently. We believe that a truly spectacular event, a truly lasting legacy, must be built on a foundation of absolute authenticity and legally binding agreements. Liam let out a low, appreciative chuckle from the front row. He understood the lethal precision of my words. I was delivering a keynote speech on corporate excellence while simultaneously summarizing the exact pathology that had destroyed my sister's life mere hours prior. "We do not deal in illusions," I concluded, my voice steady and powerful. "We deal in reality. And tonight, this reality belongs to all of you. Please Enjoy the evening." The room erupted into genuine, enthusiastic applause. I stepped down from the podium, immediately enveloped by a crowd of potential clients and eager reporters. The rest of the evening blurred into a highly successful networking marathon. Contracts were discussed. Business cards changed hands. The local lifestyle press interviewed me regarding my innovative approach to high-security luxury events, ensuring the Joan & Company brand would dominate the regional news cycle for weeks to come. While I secured my financial future inside the climate-controlled atrium, the narrative outside the gates reached its logical, devastating conclusion. The security cameras mounted along the perimeter captured the final hours of Peyton's delusion. Following Preston's abrupt departure, the 150 bewildered wedding guests slowly filtered out of the parking lot. They offered awkward, whispered condolences to Thomas and Brenda before climbing into their vehicles and driving away. They recognized the social toxicity of the situation and opted for immediate self-preservation. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the visitor parking lot was entirely empty, save for the silver Mercedes. Peyton sat in the dirt near the edge of the manicured hedges, her ruined Vera Wang gown billowing around her like a deflated parachute. She was completely isolated. The bridesmaids who had arrived with her at dawn had called a rideshare service and departed hours ago, unwilling to remain associated with the spectacular fraud. Brenda sat in the passenger seat of the Mercedes, staring blankly through the windshield. Thomas stood near the trunk, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened. The patriarch who believed his wealth could purchase any reality he desired had spent the last 4 hours pacing the hot asphalt, unable to fix a problem he had actively enabled. Peyton's destruction was not an act of malicious revenge on my part. I did not force her to lie to her fiancé. I did not compel her to mail invitations for a venue she did not lease. I did not instruct her to hire a fake discount catering company. I simply secured my own perimeter and refused to yield my reality to accommodate her delusion. Peyton had constructed a massive, fragile house of cards, stacking lie upon lie, arrogance upon arrogance, assuming the world would simply hold its breath and keep the structure standing. I merely opened a window and allowed the wind to blow. The weight of her own unchecked entitlement caused the collapse. As the sun dipped below the savannah horizon, casting long, dark shadows across the estate, Thomas finally walked over to his youngest daughter. He reached down, grabbing Peyton by the arm and hauling her to her feet. She did not resist. She moved like a hollow shell, the frantic, demanding energy entirely drained from her body. They loaded into the silver Mercedes. The engine started, a quiet, defeated hum in the twilight. They drove down the long access road, passing the digital marquee that still brightly advertised my corporate triumph. They turned onto the highway and disappeared into the night. The physical conflict was resolved. The immediate threat was neutralized. However, the social and digital shockwaves generated by the day's events were just beginning to gather momentum. My family had escaped the parking lot, but they could not escape the high-definition reality they had created. The true fallout was looming, ready to permanently alter the hierarchy they had fought so viciously to protect. The weekend concluded, but the shockwaves generated on October 14th rippled outward, multiplying in force and velocity. My calculated corporate launch proved to be an unmitigated professional triumph. By Tuesday morning, high-definition photographs of the matte black and gold atrium dominated the social feeds of Savannah's elite. Regional business journals published glowing reviews of my keynote speech, praising Joan & Company as a formidable new powerhouse in the luxury event sector. My inbox flooded with premium inquiries, effectively securing my financial trajectory for the next 3 years. Conversely, the digital footprint of my sister's delusion manifested as a catastrophic, viral disaster. The 150 high society guests who arrived in formal wear to an empty parking lot did not remain silent. They possessed smartphones, social media accounts, and a deep, offended sense of entitlement. They had traveled, booked hotels, and purchased expensive gifts for a wedding that did not exist. By Wednesday afternoon, the hashtag #FakeSavannahWedding began trending locally on video sharing platforms. Guests uploaded shaky, zoomed-in footage captured from their vehicle dashboards. The videos depicted Peyton sobbing on the hood of the Mercedes. They showed my father arguing furiously with the off-duty police officers. They featured Preston, the wealthy New York investment banker, shouting about venue fraud before speeding away in his black SUV. The comment sections beneath these videos transformed into a brutal, unfiltered public tribunal. Users dissected the audacity required to mail out gold-foiled invitations for a building without holding a legal lease. They mocked the discount catering truck that wisely abandoned the property. The public narrative swiftly and accurately condemned Peyton, not as a tragic victim of a logistical error, but as a deeply disturbed individual who attempted to orchestrate a massive social scam. My parents, trapped in the center of this digital firestorm, panicked. They operated under the antiquated belief that a strong family statement could suppress internet viral velocity. Thomas and Brenda drafted a lengthy, convoluted message and posted it across their personal social media channels. They attempted to spin a narrative of victimization. They claimed they were the targets of a malicious, coordinated corporate sabotage. They insinuated that my firm, Joan & Company, utilized unethical industry leverage to illegally lock Peyton out of a venue she rightfully secured. They wanted to shift the blame, hoping to salvage their rapidly deteriorating social standing by painting me as the villain. I did not engage in a public digital shouting match. I did not post a counter statement. I simply forwarded their fabricated claims to my corporate attorney. Within 4 hours, a courier delivered a heavy, certified legal envelope to my parents' country club estate. The document inside was a brutal, uncompromising cease and desist order. It outlined the exact legal parameters of defamation and libel. It attached copies of my original notarized lease agreement, the receipt acknowledging the $15,000 relinquishment fee, and the formal police trespass warning issued to Thomas and Brenda at the estate gates. The cease and desist concluded with a clear, unambiguous threat. If Thomas or Brenda continued to publish false, defamatory statements regarding Joan & Company or my legal possession of the Savannah Botanical Estate, my legal team would immediately file a massive civil suit for corporate damages. Faced with the undeniable threat of financial ruin and armed with zero legal standing, my parents abruptly deleted their social media posts. Their attempt at damage control evaporated, leaving them exposed and defenseless against the public backlash. However, the most devastating consequence did not originate from the internet. It originated from the boardroom. Thomas Joan built his entire identity around his prestige as a senior partner at a prominent corporate law firm. He viewed himself as an untouchable patriarch, a man whose influence shielded his family from consequence. He frequently lectured us during childhood dinners, tapping his crystal glass for emphasis. Reputation takes 20 years to build, he would say, his voice heavy with authority, and it takes exactly 5 minutes to destroy. The poetic justice of his own philosophy manifested with lethal precision. Preston's father, the intimidating New York contract law attorney, did not merely pack up his family and leave the parking lot. He returned to his Manhattan office and executed a swift, clinical severing of ties. For the past decade, Preston's family firm had utilized Thomas's Georgia-based practice as their primary regional counsel for Southern corporate acquisitions. It was a highly lucrative, prestigious account that anchored Thomas's standing within his own partnership. On Thursday morning, Thomas received a formal notice terminating the professional relationship. Preston's father explicitly cited the events at the Savannah Botanical Estate. He stated that his firm could not confidently retain regional counsel who demonstrated such a profound public lack of ethical judgment, logistical competence, and basic contract comprehension. Thomas lost his most valuable corporate client because he chose to enable his daughter's fraudulent delusion in a public parking lot. His reputation, meticulously cultivated over 3 decades, shattered in the span of an afternoon. The crushing weight of his professional humiliation, combined with the viral social mockery, drove Thomas to a state of desperate, furious denial. He needed a target. He needed to reclaim a fraction of the power he had hemorrhaged. He sent an email directly to my corporate inbox late Thursday evening. The subject line read, "Urgent Financial Resolution." "Calixta," the email began, devoid of any paternal warmth, "your actions this past weekend resulted in catastrophic damages to this family. Due to your refusal to open the gates, Peyton lost her entire $20,000 catering deposit, along with thousands in non-refundable floral and decor retainers. You manipulated a technicality to steal a venue we paid for. I demand the immediate return of the $15,000 check I wrote you in February to help cover your sister's massive financial losses. Send the wire transfer by tomorrow, or we will explore our own legal options regarding your deceptive business practices." I read the email while sitting at my sleek, minimalist desk, the city lights of Savannah glittering through my office window. He was still trying to bully me. He was still attempting to use financial intimidation to force me to subsidize my sister's arrogance. I opened my accounting software. I did not draft a defensive reply. I did not engage with his threats of legal action, knowing his threats were entirely hollow. I drafted an official, itemized corporate invoice. I formatted the document on Joan & Company letterhead. In the client billing section, I typed Thomas Joan. Under the services rendered column, I entered a highly specific, indisputable line item: security dispatch, perimeter reinforcement, and nuisance cleanup at Joan & Company Corporate Gala. I set the total cost for these services at exactly $15,000. I saved the invoice as a secure document file. I opened a massive red digital stamp graphic and placed it diagonally across the bottom of the invoice. The stamp read in bold capital letters, "Paid in full." I attached the finalized document to an email reply. I left the body of the message entirely blank, save for a single, concise sentence: "Have a nice life." I clicked send, watching the digital confirmation flash across my screen. The transaction was complete. The $15,000 was legally accounted for as a nuisance cleanup fee, ensuring he could never pursue a legitimate civil claim for the funds. I had successfully absorbed his financial weapon and utilized it to fund the exact event that destroyed his social standing. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my ergonomic chair. The silence in my office felt different now. It was not the tense, anxious silence of waiting for an attack. It was the deep, resonant silence of absolute victory. The family that had spent 28 years demanding I shrink to accommodate their golden child had finally collided with a boundary they could not break, buy, or manipulate. The war was officially over, and the battlefield belonged entirely to me. The transition from the oppressive coastal heat of Savannah to the crisp, high-altitude chill of the Blue Ridge Mountains took only a few hours by car, but it felt like crossing into an entirely different dimension. December brought a sharp, biting frost to northern Georgia, painting the towering pine trees in a delicate layer of silver ice. The air smelled of cedar wood and distant wood smoke, a clean, bracing scent that cleared the lungs and settled the mind. I stood in the primary suite of a historic timber and stone villa, watching snowflakes drift lazily past the thick glass window pane. Today was my actual wedding day. The contrast between the chaotic, frantic energy of my sister's fabricated October disaster and the serene stillness of this winter morning was profound. There was no frantic pacing. There were no shrill demands echoing down the hallway. There were no parents calculating the social net worth of the arriving guests. My real wedding dress did not feature defensive, heavy structural silk or unyielding gold armor. It was a fluid, elegant silhouette of soft ivory lace and understated crepe. It was a garment designed for joy, not for battle. I did not need to wear armor anymore. The war was over, and the borders of my life were permanently secure. I turned away from the window, looking at the small, beautiful room. My lead production designer, Marcus, sat in an overstuffed armchair near the roaring fireplace, sipping a mug of hot apple cider. He had traded his usual black logistical crew uniform for a sharp charcoal suit. He smiled, lifting his mug in a silent, supportive toast. The guest list for our ceremony totaled exactly 30 people. We invited individuals who brought genuine light into our lives. We surrounded ourselves with loyal colleagues, lifelong friends, and Liam's incredibly kind, grounded relatives. The space was devoid of toxic obligation. When the time arrived, I walked down the sweeping wooden staircase. I did not have a father to walk me down the aisle, and I did not miss his presence. I walked myself toward my future, my steps steady and unhurried. The ceremony took place in the grand library of the estate. A towering stone fireplace served as our altar, crackling with warmth and bathing the room in a soft, flickering glow. Garlands of fresh winter greenery and white roses draped across the mantel. Liam stood waiting for me. He wore a deep navy suit, his expression radiating a quiet, immense pride. As I approached him, he reached out, taking both of my hands in his. His grip was firm and anchoring. We exchanged vows that we wrote ourselves, words rooted in truth, mutual respect, and an unwavering commitment to protect the sanctuary we had built together. There were no flashing press cameras. There were no local politicians to impress. There was only the hushed, reverent silence of people who genuinely loved us, witnessing a union built on reality. Following the ceremony, the villa transformed into a haven of warmth and celebration. Our guests dined on roasted winter vegetables and braised short ribs at a single long farmhouse table. The wine flowed freely. Laughter echoed against the high wooden beams. Later in the evening, Liam and I slipped away from the dining hall, stepping out onto the expansive wraparound deck. The freezing night air instantly pricked our skin, but the heat from the indoor fireplace radiated through the glass doors behind us. We stood side by side, leaning against the wooden railing, looking out over the dark, quiet expanse of the mountain valley. Liam wrapped his suit jacket over my shoulders, pulling me close. "It is incredibly peaceful out here," he murmured, resting his chin against the top of my head. "It is perfect," I replied, watching our breath form white clouds in the frigid air. We stood in comfortable silence, listening to the faint, joyful sound of our friends celebrating inside. The absence of my biological relatives did not leave a hollow void in my chest. It left a vast, open space, a pristine canvas where I could finally paint a life without arbitrary rules and punitive conditions. I had spent 28 years mourning a family that viewed me as an inconvenient obstacle. I realized standing on that deck that I no longer missed them. I only mourned the illusion of who I wished they had been. The people dancing inside the villa were my true family. They were the ones who chose to be here. I want to step away from the story for a moment and speak directly to you. If you are listening to this, you might be trapped in a similar cycle. You might have a family member who demands you shrink yourself to accommodate their sprawling entitlement. You might have parents who use their affection as a currency, rewarding compliance and punishing boundaries. They will utilize guilt as a weapon. They will try to convince you that protecting your peace is an act of unforgivable selfishness. They will tell you that being the bigger person means setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. It is a lie. You do not owe anyone your sanity, your financial security, or your milestones. You do not have to forfeit your dreams simply because someone else demands to stand in your spotlight. Sometimes, being the bigger person does not mean offering endless forgiveness. Sometimes, being the bigger person means letting them play their stupid games while you quietly change the locks on the stadium. Have you ever had to enforce an ironclad boundary against an entitled family member? Have you ever walked away from a toxic dynamic to protect the life you built? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one because sharing these experiences dismantles the isolation that manipulators rely on. We find our strength in realizing we are not alone. Thank you for spending your time with me and following this journey to its conclusion. If you found satisfaction in seeing arrogance collide with reality, please hit the like button and subscribe to Revenge Order. Your support allows this channel to bring you more stories of resilience, justice, and unyielding boundaries. Take care of yourselves, protect your peace, keep your receipts, and never give up your venue. The image of a ruined designer gown dragging across hot Georgia asphalt is difficult to forget. When we look back at the wreckage of October 14th, the flashing police lights, the fleeing luxury SUVs, the quiet click of a locked iron gate, it is easy to view the event simply as a clash between two sisters. It reads as a tale of stolen venues and corporate retribution. But peel back the layers of tool and legal paperwork, and a much deeper, far more unsettling narrative emerges. This is not just a story about a hijacked wedding date. It is a cautionary tale about the architecture of a family, the invisible weight of parental responsibility, and the quiet tragedies we author when we value reputation over reality. In traditional American culture, we often measure a family's success by its visible milestones. We look for the country club memberships, the prestigious university decals on the rear window of the family car, and the flawlessly orchestrated holiday portraits. Thomas and Brenda curated this exact image. They built a towering facade of success. Yet their most profound failure occurred inside the quiet walls of their own home, long before a single catering truck was turned away. Parenting requires a delicate, relentless balance between provision and preparation. Providing for a child is a matter of resources. Preparing them for the world is a matter of character. Thomas and Brenda provided everything for their eldest daughter. They funded her desires, shielded her from the consequences of her financial recklessness, and treated her every whim as a royal decree. They believed they were demonstrating love. In truth, they were disabling her. By constantly demanding that the younger child yield, instructing her to be the bigger person or surrender her hard-earned milestones, parents do not teach their golden child how to lead. They teach them how to steal. When a family structure lacks fairness, it inevitably breeds entitlement. Peyton grew into an adult who genuinely believed she could overwrite a legally binding contract simply because she wanted the building. She believed the universe, like her father, would always write a check to smooth over her lack of preparation. Her parents shielded her from the word no for 3 decades, ensuring that when she finally heard it, the impact shattered her entire life. Conversely, consider the unintended lessons imparted to the child treated as an afterthought. When a family treats a daughter's boundaries as an inconvenience and her achievements as secondary, they force her to build her own armor. She learns that conditional love is a currency she cannot afford to earn. She learns to read the subtext of a room, to guard her resources, and to trust paper over promises. The resilience forged in that kind of emotional isolation is formidable, but it is born of profound grief. Honesty and emotional awareness are the bedrock of a healthy family. Thomas and Brenda lacked both. They preferred the comfort of a serene, smiling dinner table over the messy, difficult work of addressing genuine conflict. When they handed over a $15,000 check to buy a wedding date, they engaged in transactional parenting. They utilized wealth to silence dissent. They accepted fake tears because surface-level compliance was easier to manage than actual emotional truth. If we only demand obedience from our children, we raise actors. We train them to perform the roles we assign them, sacrificing their authentic selves to maintain our preferred narrative. When the cameras turn off, those actors are left hollow, incapable of navigating the friction of the real world. Raising children to navigate modern society requires equipping them with the tools of accountability. It means allowing them to feel the sting of a failed project, the disappointment of a missed opportunity, and the weight of their own decisions. It means celebrating the quiet, steady achievements just as loudly as the glamorous ones. A family should serve as a secure harbor where children learn how to build their own ships, not a fortress where they are hidden from the wind. These are the quiet, critical choices that define generations. The way we resolve a dispute at the dinner table today dictates how our children will resolve their crises decades from now. If we teach them that truth is malleable, that boundaries are optional, and that appearances supersede integrity, we are simply handing them the blueprints for their own eventual destruction. Unpacking these complex, often painful family dynamics is why we gather in spaces like this. We tell these stories because they hold up a mirror to the quiet corners of our own lives. If you find value in these reflections, if you are navigating the difficult journey of breaking generational patterns and building your own sanctuary of truth, I invite you to subscribe and follow Sophia Told Stories. Here we explore the unvarnished realities of the human experience, finding strength in shared lessons and hard-won wisdom. Think about the front door of your own childhood home. Think about the rules, spoken and unspoken, that govern the spaces between the walls. We all carry the echoes of our upbringing into the lives we build as adults. We carry the expectations, the biases, and the definition of what love is supposed to look like. Some people spend their entire lives trying to unlock a gate that was never meant for them, weeping on the asphalt, wondering why the key they were handed does not turn the mechanism. Others walk away from the gate entirely, choosing to build a quiet, sturdy house in the mountains, far away from the noise. Look closely at the foundation beneath your feet. Are you standing on solid ground, built with your own hands, fortified by honesty and mutual respect? Or are you standing inside a fragile, beautiful glass atrium, waiting for a storm you pretend is not coming, hoping the walls hold just a little bit longer?